We the Poisoned, Exposing the Flint Water Crisis Cover-Up and the Poisoning of 100,000 Americans by Jordan Chariton. Dedication to Anat, whose sacrifice and support has allowed me to pursue my purpose and fight for the forgotten and discarded. And to Lily, who I hope will one day read this and understand why her dad never gave up on Flint. Foreword. It's hard for me to comprehend that 30 years have passed since I first began my work in a small desert town in California. Back then, a giant utility was covering up massive water contamination that was harming and killing good, innocent people. It was this that ultimately led to the firm Erin Brockovich. It's unimaginable and inexcusable that the same man-made corruption, greed, and recklessness still exists decades later. Far from isolated dilemma affecting one town, the crisis of poisonous water has spread to thousands of towns in every state across the United States. Unfortunately, so has poisonous government. Over the past 30 years, I've seen where the failures are, from a lack of government oversight, to a failure and recklessness of our elected leaders, to a futile and compromised EPA, to bureaucratic mismanagement of funds, to failing infrastructures, to deception, cover-ups, and a blatant disregard for the health of our national environment and communities. Nearly half of the tap water in the United States is contaminated with cancer-causing forever chemicals, according to a 2021 U.S. Geographical Survey. Over 10 million lead pipes are still beneath us. Many are nearly a century old, delivering drinking water to our taps, and that's likely an undercount. In an increasingly loosely regulated country, corporate giants continue to dump their waste into our rivers, lakes, and waterways and taint our water, air, animals, and ecosystems. Sadly, this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the threat of contaminants wreaking havoc on our health and families. Being a fighter is baked into my DNA, but I'd be lying if I didn't acknowledge that it sometimes seems so bleak, so dark and daunting. I just want to bury my head in the sand. But I can't. We can't. We simply don't have the time to waste thinking that someone else is going to fix this for us, that rescue choppers are close. At this moment, I'm beginning to see some bright spots. Communities are rising together, taking action, and speaking up. The people fighting back have been led by the moms of the world who are fed up with the profit-obsessed corporate sociopaths and government officials who are supposed to be protecting our families, making them sacrificial guinea pigs. For 30 years, I've witnessed these everyday heroes living through the pain and suffering of their families being poisoned by water and lies. Despite the carnage, there's been a positive shift. I see it, I feel it, and wherever I go investigating the poisoning of yet another community, I see that something's different. Change and action are something from the grassroots, that something is different. No, that from the grassroots level and deep within ourselves. Maybe we got comfortable, maybe we became complacent, or maybe we bought into the illusion that some Superman was about to fly in and save us all. But now we're seeing that there's no wizard or Superman coming to the rescue. In reality, it's up to us to find our courage, to use our hearts, and to think for ourselves. We're beginning to show up, speak up, and come together to expose the truth of the recklessness and corruption happening in our own backyards. I have seen over and over again in countless communities that when we activate, we become the force that can create the change. One of the best examples of this is in Flint, Michigan, where a massive, ongoing cover-up and crime against humanity has been perpetuated against innocent people for a decade. These unconscionable crimes have been buried by a state whose leaders knowingly sent poisoned water straight to the taps of its citizens. It was the moms, the dads, the neighbors, the doctors, and many more who reached out, spoke out, and pushed to expose the truth. In the face of government, lies, and threats, these everyday heroes trusted their inner voices that something was very wrong. To this day, many of them have still not given up the fight for justice for Flint. Before any journalists began to dig, it was the people of Flint who helped Flint residents who began to peel back the thick onion layers of crimes and an unfathomable cover-up that began with the theft of their democracy by unelected emergency managers seizing their government. It was Flint residents who screamed for 18 months, often into an empty cave of government disregard, that their state and city leaders were knowingly poisoning them. It was Flint residents who stood up and said, "Enough is enough. I can't believe it, but it's been 10 years since Flint, Michigan was attacked by its own government. It's been 10 years, and regardless of the government's spin and the cherry-picked and manipulated data, the people of Flint are still being poisoned by their water. Nauseatingly, it's been 10 years and still no government officials have been held accountable. In fact, many have managed to bury their crimes from the public. Until now. While trying to help the people of Flint, I came across an independent journalist named Jordan Chariton, who made it its professional and personal mission to expose who really poisoned Flint and why. Through Chariton's unparalleled investigative reporting on the Flint water crisis, which included 20 trips to the embattled city since the crisis sparked international headlines in 2016, we find another example of the courage needed to combat the government corruption and cover-ups poisoning our nation. I am happy to say that in this book, Chariton exposes it all, the real, raw, dirty, painful, corrupt, and uncautionable. Though on-the-ground journalism and relationships established with dozens of residents, Chariton embarked on a quest for justice and accountability on behalf of the poisoned people of Flint. More than any journalist, Chariton has lived and breathed this story, fighting against a growing tide of media distractions and sensationalism to keep the Flint water crisis in the minds and hearts of Americans. Through deep reporting and even deeper sources, Chariton has unraveled what could be called the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. He has done this by dedicating hundreds of hours to interviews with the residents of Flint, many of whom credit him with keeping the story alive long after the national news media moved on. Perhaps most impressively, Chariton has shown why this story is not merely about one city or one immoral cover-up, but really about the unholy merger of our government and corporate America, and the resulting toxicity that has infected our representative democracy. Contrary to many journalists who allow major disasters to fade with time, Jordan has been hellbent on making sure the American people know the Flint water crisis is not over and is still raging. His ability to expose a toxic government and those responsible for poisoning the 100,000 people comes from a tenaciousness and passion for justice that is steadfast and admirable. The following story is born from Chariton's relentless reporting and dedication to exposing the truth. For those leaders who think they have an idea about government corruption, be prepared to be shocked to the core by the end of We the Poisoned. Just when it comes to the layers of this cover-up have been revealed, Chariton peels back even more. He stops at nothing to expose the ugly and jaw-dropping information that we the people must know. Without it, these tragedies, lies, rot, and corruption will continue to play out across America. The time is here, and thanks to Chariton, so is the truth. It is now on us to act.